Ladies and gentlemen, joining me on the line, we are going to talk some college football with Reina Garcia from Local 5. We are Iowa. She's sports director over there. Reina, it's been an interesting few weeks since last we talked.
Yeah, well, it was already crazy, but little did we know at the end of our conversation that it was going to get a whole lot crazier, and it's only continued since then.
And let me preface this by saying we are recording on August 22nd at about 1:30 in the afternoon. So there's a chance that this may be out of date within the next 5 minutes. Who knows at this point, right?
Yeah, at this rate, I would not doubt it.
So here we are. We're less than 2 weeks away from the start of college football here in the state of Iowa. Both Iowa and Iowa State going to be kicking off their season on September 2nd. And it's been kind of interesting because both teams are dealing with the gambling stuff. And there is definitely, I think at least, a better feeling on one side of the state than the other. Is that fair to say, Reina?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt Iowa State is more affected by this just because, they have several starters that have been charged. And, obviously the first one we heard about was Hunter Deckers.
Yes.
And, he's your starting quarterback. That, was the one that kind of put people on alert. I mean, that's a huge deal, but, like I mentioned earlier, little did we know there would be more Jyrell Brock and Deshaun Hanukkah, Isaiah Lee, Jake Remsburg. I mean, all these guys that are starters, and it's not something you want as you're preparing for an upcoming season.
No.
The crazy thing, too, is we still don't know, at least the public, and it seems like coaches at this point don't know either, what the punishments will be as far as the NCAA goes. So I think, obviously the criminal charges are important, but I think the real thing they're paying attention to, the coaches want to know, is will our players lose their eligibility for good?
Yeah.
Or what's that going to look like? And that is a really tough spot to be in 2 weeks before the season starts.
The whole gambling thing on a whole, I don't care if the kids want to do it, but the thing that I thought was crazy about this, and it was the two things that really stuck out to me is one, if you're using someone else's identity to do it, that's never going to work, The other thing is betting on your own team. In the history of sports, when has that ever been a good idea?
Yeah, there's very pretty prominent examples of where that went really, really bad, and continues to, be considered like an unforgivable offense.
Yeah.
So, but, maybe, these kids are pretty young, so, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they didn't know who Pete Rose was.
Yeah.
Even though I feel like everyone does,
I don't know. Those are the two things that stuck out to me. One, using someone else's identity, if they did do it, and the betting on your own team has just never been a good idea. So
the coaches have mentioned this too, and I know this from my own experience as a former Division I athlete, is you do have to go through compliance meetings, and they address a lot of topics in those, but one of them is gambling, and they kind of lay it out plain for you. You just don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons. You're underage. You're an NCAA athlete. So it's just best to steer clear. And so, like you were saying, it's one thing if they want to bet on, NBA games, NFL games, but it's the betting on your own games that I think is where a lot of people felt like the red flags were, because then you have to pull into question, well, were results in any way altered? And it's just, you get into that territory, and that can be really problematic, especially for, Kirk Ferentz and Matt Campbell. It's just, how do you handle that?
Yeah.
You don't even want to think about the possibility if that's even, in the realm of what could be going on. So, yeah, I think it was the betting on your own games, the part that really caught a lot of people's attention. And I think a lot of, people have admitted, in leadership positions. I mean, Kirk Ferentz even said at his media days, he said that, I think everyone probably needs to do a better job of not only educating these players, but themselves, because, gambling has become a huge industry. It's becoming legal in all these states, and it's so accessible. It's everywhere. It's advertised everywhere. And so, of course, there's going to be that temptation for these young guys to want to do it. And, so I do think that's a part of it, is maybe the education needs to kind of evolve and kind of catch up to the times that we're in, with betting being just everywhere now.
Again, I don't care that they bet it. I really don't. I don't care if, one
Yeah.
guy made 40 grand off. Good for him. But when you bet on your own team or change your identity, it's like, okay, that's probably not going to end well. But anyways, we'll get to the actual football preview now. Let's jump into Iowa State. Of course, they had the news this week that it is now official. Jairo Brock has walked away from the team. I mean, I think it's safe to say they were probably planning on him not being there. But, man, you lose your starting quarterback, a month or so before your starting running back. What's it looking like for Iowa State right now?
Yeah, it's certainly not the situation you want to be in, but I do think they maybe had an idea that this was coming. I mean, back at Iowa State's media day, Matt Campbell did mention that Jairo Brock wasn't practicing. So I think this is something they started to plan for. But it's interesting to see. I mean, Jairo Brock was injured a lot. He battled some injuries last year, and the running game was a bit of a struggle. So, even though he was their leading rusher, I wouldn't say that he's an irreplaceable guy, if that makes sense. And, with Cortavious Norton hopefully healthy this year, I know he had some injuries. So I don't think that's as big of an issue as it looks like, on the surface. But I think the quarterback thing is going to be really interesting to see play out because you essentially have two guys battling for that position in Rocco Becht and J.J. Cole, both relatively inexperienced. I mean, you have J.J. Cole, the true freshman, and you have Rocco Becht, who only played, I think, appeared in 3 games last season. So fairly young, but, I mean, I think it's a good way to start fresh. I mean, you have a new offensive coordinator, Nate Scheelhaus, and so I think this actually, I don't want to say best case scenario for them, but I think it's not horrible because it gives you a chance to start fresh almost across the board. And I think that is what they need this season, just considering all the inconsistency on offense last year. I think that really played a role in why the season didn't pan out the way they had hoped.
They reminded me of Iowa a couple years ago when they went 4-8 and they had like 7 games. And it was the same thing for Iowa State last year where they had how many games and it was 1 possession, where that season could have been much different if the ball rolled a little bit different,
Yeah, well, I was actually just looking at my notes. I think it was actually 7 games this last season that were decided by 7 points or less for a lot of reasons, whether it was a few missed field goals or, just not being able to execute in the red zone. And so it's kind of crazy to think that as much as they struggled, they still were a coin flip essentially away from having a winning record and possibly being one of the better teams in the Big 12. So I think this year is a really good chance for them to kind of reset and try and get those things ironed out and get on the right track. I mean, obviously the Big 12 is tough, but I don't think it's impossible for them to trend upward.
Reina Garcia from We Are Iowa, Local 5 on the line with me. We're doing some college football talk. When it came to scheduling, the Big 12 didn't give Iowa State any favors this year. With the stuff on offense, with, just the team in general, what is the ceiling with this very tough schedule?
It was funny because I was talking to Jeff Woody, former Iowa State running back. I host iHawk Game Day with him. And, he mentioned that a lot of the Big 12 games are kind of coin flips, right? I mean, even though you can look at a team's record last year and think, wow, they're kind of on the struggle bus, there's really no give-me games. And so I do think that kind of works in Iowa State's favor in that they, I think they can compete. So I don't think it's even though it is a tough schedule, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that, they'll get crushed by teams towards the top. And so, but it's certainly not your most favorable schedule. But I think if they can get things going, build up that confidence in the non-conference games, I think they could be at least middle of the pack this year.
Okay. That's actually, boy, I'm more doom and gloom with this stuff than you, I think.
I try to be positive, I try to see the upside until I'm proven otherwise, I guess is usually how I like to go into these things.
I get you. It is tough when you have a team coming off a 4-8 year when they have that many close losses, and nobody ever talks about if they won those games by that same amount, nobody would, bring that up if it was the flip side. But I guess, I don't know. It's just, until I see the offense and what they're going to do there, I mean, it's hard to replace your 2 top guys.
Yeah, it is. But I do think, those guys, or I guess, at least with Hunter Deckers, I think there were a lot of struggles with him that, it's obviously we won't be able to tell now whether he, takes a huge jump in this year. But I do think, some of the inconsistencies were kind of obviously not all on him, but I do think, he was the root of some of them. And so I think, like I mentioned, I keep mentioning starting fresh. I think it can give, Iowa State the chance to run their system the way they want to, and hopefully, get that offense to a point where it's not consistently inconsistent. That's kind of what I called them last year. You could always count on them to do something really good and then turn the ball over like crazy. And so I think this year they could start trending in the right direction.
Well, it's funny. We talk about Hunter Deckers like he was awful last year. He was third in the Big 12 for passing yards.
No,
it's not like he was
not
awful.
That at all.
And I know that some people, you bring up the offense last year and you get a new offensive coordinator on that, and it's like he was third at a conference that likes to throw the ball. It's not like he was garbage.
Yeah, and I think it didn't help him too that they just really couldn't establish their run game and give him that balance that really would have helped him, because I do think maybe there were times where he felt like he just had to do it all. Mm-hmm. And any time a quarterback is pressing and trying too hard, you force things, a lot of forced passes to Xavier Hutchinson. I mean, who wouldn't want to target that guy? But, of course, defenses are going to key in on that guy and try to take him away. So I do think if they had a little bit more of a consistent run game, it would have been, helped him out a lot more and not have to make some of those silly mistakes just because you feel like you don't have any other option.
What game are you looking forward to most for Iowa State this year? If you had to pick one.
I would say it's the regular season finale against Kansas State. One, because K-State is my alma mater. So, of course, I always love to see that. And, the game last year.
Who are you picking to win, Reina?
I will plead the fifth on that one. I'm going to wait and see. But no, I think you got me there.
Okay.
What do you think last year's game? Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't want to put you on the spot. I get it. It's hard to make a choice in that situation. But how about this? Iowa State above or below 500 this year, or 500? You have three options, I guess.
I think I'm going to go a little bit above 500.
Wow, really?
I know. I just
not against K-State though.
Too. Hey, that's the last game of the season, so I feel like I have some time to kind of formulate my prediction on that one. But I think what we don't think about too is the defense. I mean, of course, you lose a guy like Will McDonald. That's tough. Orion Vance, MJ Anderson. But they have such a reputation for always being one of the best in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And, hey, defense wins you games. I mean, look at Iowa. If you can have a dominant defense, and if your offense can just be even okay.
We'll get there.
I think that can get you a couple. Yeah, I think that can get you a couple of games. And I feel like I think they can do that. I'm told you, I'm looking at things optimistically.
Yeah.
I like to until I'm proven otherwise. And because there's just so many unknown factors, I would like to think that Matt Campbell is also, I wouldn't say feeling the pressure, but I think he definitely wants to right the ship sooner rather than later.
I was saying this was going to be a big year from Matt Campbell, and it changes it because of what you've lost and the things that are going on with the team right now because of the gambling. Mm-hmm. But if you go back through it, you had the opening year where things were bad. The next year you showed remarkable improvement. You got the 2020 where you had one of your best teams ever. You got the win over Oregon in the bowl game. And then you had a team that was supposed to be the best team in Iowa State history go about 7 wins, I think, with Brock Purdy that year. Mm-hmm. And then, you go on, and last year you go 4-8. I think you're at a point in this in his tenure as coach where you're going to start to see, okay, people think he is what he was sold to be, or they're going to start, asking those questions. Is, Matt Campbell best for business? Yeah.
I mean, I think you could definitely consider it a prove it year. I feel like you kind of are at a point in the road where it's like, okay, you face some adversity. Now people want to see how you respond, because then if it continues, well, then some people may view it as a pattern. So, yeah, I think this is a huge year for him, and especially the changes that he made to his coaching staff to, they want to have results to show for it. And so I think, and I think, too, anytime you face, the whole betting scandal, sometimes it can galvanize the team, Sometimes it can create this mindset of, if it's us versus the world and we want to prove everyone wrong. And sometimes that just works out for teams. Yeah. They may not look the best on paper, but they got a stroke of luck that's in that motivation, and that's all they need. So I wouldn't be surprised. That's kind of why I was leaning a little bit towards over 500, just because it's like,
Okay.
I could see them coming out with a little bit of edge and wanting
Yeah.
to show, like, we're not the bottom of the barrel
Yeah.
of the bunch in the Big 12. So I could see that.
And he'll be entering his 8th season at Iowa State. So
yeah, close to a decade. So
3-9,
yeah,
8-5, 8-5, 7-6, 9-3, 7-6. That was the 2021 year where they were supposed to win a national championship, and then 4-8 last season. But that was with a brand new starting quarterback. So Reina Garcia on the line with me right now, talking college football. Let's go across the state. Much different feeling, I would say, in Iowa City right now with the Iowa Hawkeyes as they get ready to kick off their 2023 season. Again, a team that's affected by the gambling stuff, not in the same way as an Iowa State, but let's face it, if you're an Iowa Hawkeye fan, it hasn't been fun the last year and a half or so with that offense.
No, and you probably just keep wondering, is this the year things will finally be different, even though in your heart of hearts, probably not. But the good news is, there's a new guy at quarterback that a lot of people seem to be excited about, and Cade McNamara had some success at Michigan, obviously coming off of, that knee injury. But there just seems to be like this new sense of hope, maybe he can be the guy to kind of turn this around. And even, at media day, his teammates were, had some very high praise for him. And, of course, with Brian Ferentz did as well, just saying, talking about his leadership, and Nico Ragaini's talking about, he just felt like they were on the same page, more so than they've ever been in terms of, the receiving core and the quarterback. So I think there's definitely some good signs in terms of people really believe in McNamara and what he can bring. Obviously, there is a little bit of mystery just because he had that non-contact leg injury during the scrimmage. And so, of course, people are a little nervous, especially, because you're coming off of such a big injury. So I think if he can stay healthy, I could see him really, taking the offense. I'm not going to say he's going to take them into the stratosphere, but I think he can, give them a little bit more than what, obviously, what they had under Spencer Petras, and, get this offense to the level where they complement the defense rather than the defense having to do all the work for them.
Well, you said it well, and it's something I've said a lot. If they only had an okay offense last year, not great, not burn the house down great, just an okay offense last year, that team could have gone very far with that defense.
That's, I think, what was the most frustrating thing about it. Is it's just you really didn't need them to do a ton. You just needed a little bit, just give me a little bit. And it just seemed like that could never really work. The defense will put out these all-world performances, and it's just like, how do you not win with that?
Yeah.
So I think it definitely helps having Cade McNamara there. And, bringing in some guys from the portal, I think helps as well. And, it'll be curious to see kind of, what things look like from the play calling end with, Brian Ferentz obviously having some new kind of benchmarks added to his contract. So he's kind of in a prove it year too, although I will say those benchmarks that he's been given seem pretty achievable. They don't seem super difficult to reach. It would kind of almost be sound the alarms if you don't reach them.
Well, what were they saying? They were saying like, this is a team that in like 2020 had one of the best offenses in the Big Ten. And I can't, I don't remember what the exact stat was, but it was like, how did it get so bad so fast? But I think, and this is just me, theorizing, I think it wasn't so much, and people are going to hate me for saying this, it wasn't so much Brian Ferentz, because I think he's a problem, but I think he's a different sort of problem. I think it was you had a offensive line that wasn't as good as it had been, which they base so much off of having a great offensive line that you all of a sudden you have a bad offensive line that your quarterback can't move around in or make any plays, which leads to the passing not looking good. So that makes you one-dimensional, running the ball. And it just, that was the major issue. And if they could get that figured out, then some of that other stuff doesn't look as bad. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big thing this year too. Is that offensive line has got to improve even a little bit. Kirk Ferentz seems to think that they're on the right track, but you want to at least give Cade McNamara a chance to operate back there, because it would be a shame if because of, he's always running for his life, or, he's
Yeah.
not having time to let plays develop, that he couldn't, deliver on what, he's fully capable of. So I think that is going to be a huge factor in all of this too. Is that O-line going to be where it needs to be to allow the offense to be productive? And I think that was a lot of the issue last year. So I think it's even more important this year because of, McNamara having, coming off that injury, and you obviously want to keep that guy upright. So I think it's going to be crucial this year.
But I also think Cade is one of those guys that he's not a running quarterback, but if things break down, he might be able to run and keep the defense honest, because most teams nowadays, if you think about it, they're three-dimensional, where you have your rush, your pass, and your quarterback that either runs or can at least keep the play alive from it. Brock Purdy's a great example of it, where he's just quick enough and can run enough that he can keep the game moving. And Iowa hasn't had that in a while. They haven't had that guy that gives them that third option that keeps the defenses honest against them.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps that he's a guy that you can trust to improvise. Like, if he has to go off script, he can, and he feels comfortable. I think that's the big thing too, because it just kind of seemed with Petrus, it didn't always seem like he was comfortable doing that.
No.
So, like, if a play blows up, you couldn't be like, okay, he can figure it out. And it's, some quarterbacks aren't like that. But I think the nice thing with Cade McNamara is that, having the experience and being able to have that in his skill set certainly can help whenever you do have those breakdowns, or if, maybe if it takes the O-line a little bit, maybe a couple games to finally get where they need to go. I think he would be able to handle it, and he would feel comfortable if he had to do that. Obviously, not all the time, but if he has to, he can.
That's all I want.
Salvage a play. Yeah.
Seriously, you look at it for so many years, and it's like, man, you just stand there. At some point, Iowa's rushing game became a joke. And I think that's where things really changed, where in the past they would run the ball and get, you could get consistently 2 or 3 yards. So at least you were moving forward. Now it's and the thing I don't understand about Brian Ferentz sometimes is the play calling, where it's like, okay, we're going to rush on first down. We just lost 3 yards. So now we're going to throw a 25-yard pass to try and make it up, and then you're third and long.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that I don't understand. So
yeah, similarly to Iowa State, I think that, Iowa's running game needs to get a little bit more consistent, because you just want your quarterbacks to be able to rely on that balance and not having to press so hard to try and make plays on their own. And so I think that'll be crucial, but it didn't seem like as much of an issue for them. And I think it all comes back to that offensive line play. If you want to run the ball, you gotta have those offensive linemen creating holes for you and spaces to get through. So I think a lot of their success this season will ride on how much has this offensive line improved. Will they be able to improve throughout the season?
Reina Garcia on the line with me from We Are Iowa, Local 5 Sports Director over there. We didn't talk about much defense with Iowa State or Iowa, really. Both looking to be pretty good this year, right?
Yeah, I think that's one thing you can always rely on, are these two defenses to be, not only among the best in the conference, but among the best in the nation. And I think they have to be, just considering the offensive struggles that they've had. But I think that's one thing fans on both sides are not worried about. Even though you do lose key guys in the draft, there's still a lot of, they're not so young anymore, but, you still have talent on that roster that can fill in and make those big plays, for both sides. With Iowa, Cooper Jean being back, and, even younger guys like Xavier Wampa, that really showed, what they could do towards the end of the season. And then with Iowa State, you have, TJ Tampa, and you have guys that will be able to step up. So I don't think that's much of a worry for either team.
With that being said, Iowa's schedule much more favorable than Iowa State's this year. They don't have Ohio State. They don't have Michigan on the regular season schedule. What are we thinking for Iowa?
I think they, like you said, they have a little bit of an easier schedule. So, of course, I'm going to go, of course, I think they'll get, I see 8 wins. I see 8 wins this season, because I think there's really only a couple games that I'm a little hesitant about. I think the Wisconsin one could be a little bit of trouble. But I think what does help them is, having some of these kind of coin flip games at home. I see 8 wins. I feel comfortable at 8 wins.
Okay. Wow, you went after that a lot faster than the Iowa State stuff.
Yeah, Iowa State one is, I feel like I kind of go back and forth. I felt like at first I was kind of, low end, but then as I kind of look at things, talk to Jeff Woody a little bit, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm a little convinced. I'm a big believer in, some of the non off the field things in terms of like that extra motivation, that edge. And I'm buying into it.
So if you would have hosted a show with someone from Iowa, you would have the same, you'd have a much different look on it, huh?
I don't know. I mean, I think Woody, he pled his case really good, I would say. He convinced me to go up a little bit more than I was. And so I'll go with that for now. But you know what? I still have a couple of weeks before the season starts. So I have some time to change back my mind if
what are we talking about?
Decide to do so.
This could blow up here in the next couple hours, and everybody might be gambling at some point.
That's the thing. It's just like, it's like every week or so you have new developments. I mean, yesterday we just got more news of 2 more people charged in the investigation. So it's just like, you're not surprised at anything at this point, and you're just expecting more to come. I doubt this is the end of all of this. There's still, I think, more to come.
When are other teams going to get involved in? Like, when are they going to go after other teams?
That's kind of the curious thing too. And Kirk Ferentz mentioned that in his media day, speech, as he kind of mentioned. I find it curious that Iowa and Iowa State are the only schools that seem to be the ones having people charged in this. And I kind of agree. I mean, I doubt this is the only place it's happening. So I'm not quite sure if it's people saw what was going on here and maybe tried to get ahead of things before it could expand. It's really hard to say why this is only happening in Iowa and how this whole thing happened in the first place, I think, is what a lot of people want to know. How did we get here? What was the tipping point that opened this Pandora's box?
There's no way that this isn't happening on every single team out there.
Oh, 1,000%. Across tons of campuses across the country, across every sport. I mean, because like we mentioned, gambling has become such a huge thing, and it's so popular among young people, and it's so easily accessible. Like, reading a lot of the affidavits, it doesn't seem hard to really create an account, even if you're underage. If you have the, it just seems widely available. And so I doubt this is the only place it's happening, but I don't understand why we haven't seen anything in other states.
Can I float something by you?
Sure.
Do you think they're trying it out to see how it not to trial-wise and all this kind of stuff, the NCAA and all this, they're floating it to see what happens. If they have to bring the hammer down on people, they don't want to miss out on money. I mean, and Iowa and Iowa State are just the guinea pigs? Yeah,
I mean, I think, they certainly are the first program
I don't know,
under at least the new guidelines that, these are the first, at least that we know of, the first teams that that will be under these new guidelines that they set forth for gambling violations.
Again, I don't know for sure, but there's part of me, it's like, are you just testing this out to see how it goes and then change the plan later on, how you're going to deal with other teams? Or,
I mean, I do think a lot of eyes are on this in terms of a lot of, athletic departments across the country, in terms of, maybe it's causing them to go to their coaches and be like, hey, we need to talk to your players. We need to talk to our athletes and figure out what's going on. Finding ways to get ahead of this, because, it does kind of seem like Iowa and Iowa State are the guinea pigs, just in the sense that they are the first to really go through this under these new guidelines.
Yeah.
And, just based on, what we've seen in court documents and what the guidelines lay out, seems like a majority of these athletes, if the NCAA chooses to follow their guidelines, are going to lose their eligibility for good, which is like the harshest penalty, at least under the NCAA, you can get. And so it is just really curious as to why we haven't heard from them yet. And Beth Getz mentioned, I was interim AD. They're hoping to hear something, soon. But I don't know. We don't know what the NCAA timeline is. College sports have just changed so much within the past few years, like I think beyond the scope of what any of us really thought we would see.
It'll never be
quickly.
The same.
I think a lot of people thought this was 5-10 years out, yet here we are.
Yeah.
And it just seems like all these issues are coming to a head at once, and it's faster than anyone really knows what to do with. The NCAA, these athletic departments, and it just seems like the Wild West right now. Like, there's no rules, it seems like. You're kind of making it up as you go. And so it's just hard to tell where things are going to head next, because things just continue to change so quickly.
Reina Garcia from We Are Iowa Local 5 on the line. All right, I'll let you get going. We've been talking for a while now. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it. And might have to check back in with you later in the season to see, okay, things didn't go as well as I thought or things went better than I thought on your predictions.
We'll see if I was delusional or whether I was right on the money. There's no in between. No in between.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rita.
Yeah, thanks for having me.